Well, here we are. You guys made me do it, and I really didn't want to, but it's what you wanted. You asked for it, so here it is. I watched Enola Holmes. Please, nobody ask about my opinions on the film as a film, because you will not like my answer. And so I will do my best to not talk about any of the cinematic or artistic decisions in the movie, other than anything regarding the costumes for the men. I'm not going to talk about the women's costumes as creative as they were, and believe me, they have been talked to death. So, as you have requested, we are going to talk today about the men's costumes in Netflix's Enola Holmes. So today I thought I'd at least pretend to dress as if I were in the 1880s instead of the 1840s. Quick interjection. Enola Holmes takes place in 1884, and so I'm wearing a necktie instead of a cravat. And I'm wearing my new high collar frock coat. But all that aside, let's get into the film review, or the film costume review. So I have 3 characters that I'm going to look at, and I'm not going to talk about extras or background characters, because I do realize that in a film with this many extras, and it takes place in a city, so there's a lot of people in the background. It's expensive and it's time consuming to make perfectly historically accurate costumes for every single extra and background character in the film. So I'm just going to be talking about the 3 most prominent main male characters in the film, those being Sherlock Holmes, Mycroft Holmes, and Viscount Tewkesbury. So we're going to start by reviewing Sherlock's costumes. And Sherlock wears 2 different sorts of costumes in this film. He has I think there's 3 different costumes that he wears, but 2 of them are really similar. So I'm just going to go over 2. The first one that I'm going to go over is the costume that Sherlock wears in the sort of promotional image, the one where it's Sherlock, Mycroft, and Enola standing in a line. And I'm going to look at this one because it gives me a good angle and a almost full view of his sack suit. And so that's what he's wearing. He's wearing what's called a sack suit. Sack as in like a sack of potatoes. And a sack suit is sort of the great-grandfather of the modern day 3-piece suit. So the sack suit was built off of the sack coat. And really the only difference between a sack suit and a frock suit is the jacket. All the other items, the vest and the pants, are the same conceptually as what you would wear with a frock coat. But the sack suit the sack coat was invented in the mid to late 1860s, and it was popularized in the 1870s, and then became a staple of men's fashion, particularly middle class and upper middle class men's fashion, by the 1880s. And it will remain a staple of men's fashion all the way through the Edwardian era. And so what a sack coat is it's a shorter coat that reaches just down to around the mid-thighs, about where a modern 3-button suit jacket would. And a sack coat has buttons going most of the length of the suit. So it not quite all the way to the bottom, but pretty close to the top, so much so that it would button almost right up to the neckline. Now, a popular way that men would actually button the suit, it's very peculiar and kind of strange to the modern eye. Men would button just the top button and let the rest of the suit hang down loose. Now, this was probably to show off the vest underneath so that you could actually see it. I mean, what's the point of a vest if you can't see it? But it's just a really odd looking style. Regardless, it was very popular to wear your sack suit as well as other types of jackets in the 70s and 80s, by just buttoning the top button and none of the others below. So I do believe that in this photograph, and I'm pointing over here because I have my computer so I can look at the picture while I'm talking about it. But I do believe that in this photograph of Sherlock Holmes, he is wearing a sack suit, which despite him being upper class, I guess, he is a working man, so it makes sense for him to have a sack suit. And sack suits were worn by a wide range of men in that period. Of course, the very upper echelons of society would hold on to older styles, frock coats, morning coats, that's tailcoats even for evening wear, and that would remain for a long time. But the lower upper class, the upper middle class, or really the entirety of the middle class, would eventually adopt this sack suit, and it would become the most common type of suit jacket until the modern suit jacket was invented. So I will say that in this case, to start, they're doing really well. The lapel looks a little bit too long, but that might just be because it's folded over some of the buttons because he has it brushed aside. But I don't get why they left the coat unbuttoned. I realize like he's got his hands in his pockets and it's easier if your coat's unbuttoned. But like I said, it was very popular and stylish to button only the topmost button. And it buttoned very high up, almost just around where the collarbone was. And like as you can see with my coat, it buttons very high. Like you can see with Mycroft's coat right next to him, the collar's very high. So just buttoning the top button would still allow you to see the rest of the outfit. So I don't know why they didn't go with the obvious decision of buttoning the top button in this photo. I guess it would dissociate the audience and make it harder to connect, but it's not a required bit of history. It's still historically accurate without the button, but it would have been a nice touch, and it would have been not more accurate, but more common to see that top button buttoned. And then it would have also really shown to us that it was a sack suit, because it is a little bit hard to tell. But I do think that he is wearing a sack suit. And yes, the matching colors was also a thing with sack suits especially. Up until the 1870s, matching suits were not commonly worn. Often, if anything matched, it was the pants and the coat, and the vest was always odd. But most commonly, up until this point, every piece of your suit was a different color or different pattern. So yes, if you had a patterned suit, say with a check or with a plaid, it would all still match. And I don't think I've actually seen an unmatching sack suit. So as far as the actual suit goes, it looks pretty good. The vest is not too long, it buttons very high, it has a shawl collar, which was still in fashion but not as common as a notched lapel on most jackets and most vests. So it's not wrong that he's wearing a shawl collar, and it's actually perfectly fine, just less common. His vest actually has a lot of buttons. They're not spaced very far apart, which also is very popular with sack suits. We can see that the trousers are high-waisted because the vest isn't long, and the trousers still hide behind the vest, which is very good. And the whole suit looks like it's made of wool, which is also good because wool drapes well and it gives a historical look or appearance, because historically garments were made of wools and cottons and natural fibers. Now, where it really gets iffy with this look is the collar and the tie, or the shirt collar specifically. Folded collars did exist in the 1880s, but very few men actually wore folded collars, or very few men wore completely folded collars. Wingtip collars were popular, especially detachable wingtip collars that folded over just on the corners. And partially folded collars that sort of just flared out were also very popular. But completely folded collars like this weren't really common until the 1920s. And even before the 1920s, there were folded collars, but they didn't fold at an angle, they folded straight. And that's more of an Edwardian look and a 1920s look. So it looks like he's wearing a modern shirt. which is a little off-putting, or it takes me out of the experience personally. If they gave him a standing collar like they gave to Mycroft, or a wingtip collar, or even a flared, partially folded collar, it would be a bit more convincing. But personally, I just don't like how the folded collar looks in a historical context. It just looks too modern. Even if it was a thing that existed, it just doesn't look right. And as far as the necktie goes, yes, neckties were a thing at this point, but that's not what they look like. I've seen some pretty fat ties in photographs and stuff like that, but I've never seen a necktie that fat or that wide in any photograph or fashion plate from the 1880s. That's a very modern style of necktie. Ties that wide were not popular. It was actually more popular to have a very narrow necktie. The knot in his tie should be about this big. But either way, his necktie just looks too modern for the historical context. But overall, the colors are good, the materials are good, and if it is in fact a sack coat that he's wearing, then the suit looks really good. The last stipulation that I have is his hair. Curly hair was very much out of fashion at this point. It's a very Regency, early Victorian look to have curly hair. And of course, if your hair is curly, naturally you can't avoid that. But Henry Cavill's hair is not naturally curly. In most photos of him and in most movies he's in, his hair is slicked back smooth. So the decision to go with sort of wavy, curly hair is kind of a peculiar one. It almost looks like he's got hair from the 1840s, which is something that I just don't get the decision for. I mean, maybe there's some sort of historical accuracy that I'm missing here. I'm not a historian or an expert by any means, but just based on what I've seen, hair this long even and this curly was not common in the 1880s. And in fact, I haven't seen it anywhere except for on Henry Cavill. So I believe that's all I can say about this outfit. There is like one screenshot that I can find with his shoes in the shot, and they're not bad. I can't really find a good quality photo of it. The shoes are fine. Shoes are hard to do for a period drama because shoes are hard to make. So most of the time, you just have to make do with what you can buy. So I'm not really gonna go too hard on the shoes in this movie, but I believe that is all I can say about this outfit. Now, moving on down to Mycroft, he wears pretty much the same outfit throughout the entire movie. So if we look at the screenshot of him at the train station when they go to pick up Enola, he's wearing this 1880s style frock coat and top hat combination. And so far, it looks pretty good. I can't find any images of his pants or his shoes, so I'm probably not going to talk about those. But of what we can see in this picture, his outfit is again pretty accurate. Pinstripes were popular at this point, especially very subtle pinstripes like these. And dark colored frock coats were always, throughout history, more popular than light colors. Now, of course, there are exceptions, and I have a light colored frock coat myself, but in general, dark colors were more popular. As we can see, it's double-breasted, which is very good. Double-breasted frock coats in the 1880s were more popular than single-breasted, as opposed to the earlier period where single-breasted was more popular, because when you unbuttoned it, it hung better to reveal your vest, whereas in the 1880s, it's more popular to button your frock coat all the way up. Now, as we can see, he has cloth-covered buttons, which is also very good. Having exposed wooden or metal buttons was very low quality craftsmanship. And I guess if you're wearing a work vest or work coat, or you were poor and you couldn't afford extravagancies, you might have wooden buttons exposed. But in general, if you could, you would get cloth-covered buttons on your coats and your vests, just because it blends better with the coat and it looks nicer. So this is well done. And then moving up, we can see that he's wearing a stand collar shirt like mine. His is much more starched and cleaner, which makes sense because he is technically a gentleman. He is in Parliament in the House of Lords, so he does have a high social status, and so his clothes should be clean, well kept, all that jazz. We can see around his neck he's wearing a bow tie, which was very popular in this period. So they do a very good job with the neckwear. They do it very well too. It doesn't look like a modern bow tie, it looks more like a cravat tied into a bow. And so that's done very well. Moving up, we see his facial hair. He has a mustache with the rest of his face clean shaven. And this is also a very historical choice. Mustaches without a beard or mutton chops was popular in this period. So far, Mycroft is looking pretty good. Again, moving back to the frock coat, I forgot to mention, yes, the lapel is very good. Having that seam halfway in is very historically accurate. It's not the only way to go, but a lot of frock coats had this. I don't know what it's called, but I guess it's just how the lining turned out. But also, the neckline is very high. Like I was saying about the sack suit, the same applies to other coats, like the frock coat and the morning coat and the tailcoat. And actually, like I was saying before, my coat does that too, because this is a late Victorian Edwardian style. But they do a good job with the collar. They give him 4 buttons on the frock coat, which is very good. So the coat looks pretty good. It cinches in slightly at the waist with fuller sleeves and less of a bulge in the shoulder, so that's very accurate. So the frock coat looks good, the shirt looks good, and now for the last piece, we see the top hat. The top hat in the 1880s, which is the one that would stay prominent, or the design that would stay prominent through to the Edwardian period, is the top hat that we think of most when we think of a top hat. 8 to 10 inch crown, fairly curved, but not as much as the Regency period brim, usually made of beaver or silk. And I think this one's made of beaver. So as far as Mycroft's outfit, definitely very accurate. I don't know what's going on with his sleeve cuffs. I just noticed this. It looks like he has like cuffs on his coat sleeves, which I don't know how prominent that was, but we'll pass on that for now. Overall, Sherlock and Mycroft in the outfits I've gone over look pretty good. So the next outfit I'm going to do is Sherlock's frock coat outfit, which is actually very similar to Mycroft's, so the general concepts overall are pretty good for this one. He's wearing a stand collar in this outfit instead of the folded collar, which again I think looks more accurate. He's wearing a bow tie this time instead, which again looks fairly historically accurate. I only have one other real problem with this look, and that's Henry Cavill himself. In Arthur Conan Doyle's original novels, he describes Sherlock Holmes as being physically fit and very strong, but that doesn't mean he's a bodybuilder. Strong then, especially for an upper middle class, lower upper class gentleman, and strong now for a Hollywood bodybuilder, are two different worlds of physical fitness. Henry Cavill's body is not a historically accurate body, and it can't even be made to look accurate in the clothing. If you're kind of slim like I am, you can hide underneath your garments. But if you're a bodybuilder like Henry Cavill, no matter what context you're put in, your body is not going to look right in historical context, especially if you're a gentleman, no matter how physically fit you are. So that's just one of the things that I realize he can't control it, but he just doesn't have a historically accurate body type. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about Sherlock's frock suit, the color is a bit off. Blue frock coats and blue in general were sort of going out of fashion at this point. Blue is a very 1830s, 40s, and 50s color, and even by the 1860s, blue was not a very popular color. Maybe a navy blue, but not this sort of royal blue that's very obvious. It's a bit too loud. The 1880s was definitely a toned down brown, black, and gray period, especially in the city. But having a coat that's this blue and this loud is just a bit too old-fashioned for this decade. And I don't know what it is, but something about this frock coat looks kind of wrong in the textural sense. The material that it's made of, I mean, I'm sure it could be completely made like 100% cotton or wool or something like that. But it looks like the sort of cotton wool polyester blends that we see in modern suit jackets that make it kind of shiny. So because it's like got this shine to it, it looks like it's made of some polyester wool blend. And of course, polyester did not exist in the Victorian period. So just the shininess and the smoothness of this jacket make it look like it's made of a modern material and just take me out of the historical context completely. But that's all I have to say about Sherlock's frock suit. Alright, so I got those two out of the way. Now it's time for everybody's favorite, my identical twin, Viscount Tewkesbury. Now, it was hard to find high definition photos or screenshots of him, other than the one where he's on the train and he's kind of leaning forward. I'll put it on the screen. So in this one, we're looking at his white sack suit. So he wears like two different major outfits in this film. He has his white sack suit and his parliamentary morning suit. I couldn't find a good shot of his morning suit. Short version is his morning suit's fine, but as far as his white sack suit goes, it's actually pretty good. Once again, they gave him a folding collar for the sack suit for some reason, which as far as I'm aware was not as popular as a standing collar. Regardless of what type of tie you wore, necktie, bow tie, old-fashioned cravat, even if you're wearing a sack suit, a standing collar just looks more accurate, even if it has wingtips. But overall, his suit looks pretty good. Again, because it's a sack suit, all the pieces match, and that's fine. That was very common. The white is a good choice. I think it looks kind of like it's made of brushed cotton, which is a bit hefty for this time of year because it does take place in spring, summer, during the warmer parts of the year. So the white is a good choice, but I think it should be made of linen, and it looks too hefty. But again, he's wearing it unbuttoned completely, which he should be wearing it with the top button buttoned. It's just a nice touch. Again, people were people back then, so it's fully reasonable to find somebody not wearing their sack coat buttoned. But it was very popular to button the top button, so why not? But otherwise, it looks like the lapel buttons very high up towards the collarbone. His vest is right up against his collarbone, almost around his neck, so that's very good. Got a lot of buttons all the way down. It looks like maybe 6 buttons, which is quite a few. His hair, now I realize I'm not one to talk because we have the exact same hair, but I don't wear my hair like this because I'm trying to go for the 1880s look. I wear my hair like this because I'm trying to go for the 1840s look. So it should be from the start very short. Like Mycroft Holmes does a very good job with the hair, and that's how most men's hair looked. Short, well kept, slicked back. But really, that's the only stipulation I have with Tewkesbury's costume. Overall, what do I think about the costumes in this movie? They're pretty good, at least for the men. I know the women's costumes were all over the place. If you've seen Karolina Zabrowska's review of the women's costumes, you'll know full well what I'm talking about. If not, go watch it. Women's costumes problems aside, the men's costumes were pretty good. Again, there were very small things that they could have done better. It was very popular to button only the top button of your sack coat or even your morning coat. Just a fashion thing that they did. The materials looked pretty good other than that one blue frock coat. The hair was a bit off for Tewkesbury and Sherlock, but they did it well for Mycroft and most of the other characters, so it was not bad. So really, there were not too many things to complain about other than small details that could have easily been missed, and so I'm not judging the costume designer. I'm sure the costume designers even knew what they were doing. The historians and the costume designers probably know more than I do. And I'm sure a lot of the decisions were made by the director or the producer, as is the case with most period dramas. But in general, the costumes looked pretty good. They were very immersive, and they fit the period pretty well. I think the 1880s is the easiest Victorian decade to get right for men's costumes, It's the most iconic and it's the simplest silhouette, but that doesn't mean it's not difficult and expensive to do. So the costume designers and the historians did a good job on this film, at least for the menswear. Again, I'm not going to go into any of the context or the movie plot or any of the writing or anything like that. I'm going to try not to talk about Mycroft and how they misinterpreted and ruined his character completely to make him the opposite of what he was in the original stories, but I'm not going to talk about that. But I think I've said all that really has to be said. They did a good job, which I've said several times at this point. 8.5 out of 10, we'll say. There were small little details that would have made it much better, that are easy to miss, but had they included them, could have made it a 10 out of 10. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was everything that you guys were expecting. Sorry that I couldn't go into the broader context or the background characters, but that's just too many people, and I do realize it's hard and expensive to do correctly for any film studio. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like, subscribe, comment anything that you want to see down below, ring the notification bell if you want to see more videos when they come out. You know, all that jazz.